Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast. Place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 241. Who made the moment unsafe for you? Well, welcome back to this month where it's all about the important aspect of our well-being, our emotions, and being able to communicate those in healthy ways. So last week we talked about how we can disown our anger and the big consequences of that for us and for our relationships. Well, this week it's about the very place we may have learned to do just that, to not own our anger or express other important feelings, and that's in the moment. But before we do, if you find yourself struggling to express what you really think and feel and need, think about taking the work a little bit deeper and give yourself the gift of change. My Find Your Voice course is all about using your voice in an authentic way. And it gives you all the instruction, all the guidance, all the support, and some great group and one-on-one coaching. And that just takes the work a level deeper, I think. And that's what folks are sharing with me, that having that support is a game changer for them. If you're already doing therapy, it's a great adjunct to that as well. So hit the link in the show notes, message me if you have any questions, and keep it in mind as you're listening today. We've talked about the moment here on the show before, of course, and we'll continue to talk about the moment because A, I don't think it's talked about enough, and B, it's something that clients bring to me all the time as one of their biggest struggles. So today we're going to talk about what are unsafe moments and who made them unsafe for you so that you can better understand yourself, understand your struggles, and understand what you can do to work on that and heal. So what constitutes an unsafe moment? Well, these could include any experience that you've ever had of emotional, physical, or psychological harm. An unsafe moment is any situation or interaction when you felt threatened, vulnerable, or at risk of harm. Now, whether that harm is emotional, physical, or psychological doesn't matter. In fact, I think we downplay the psychological and emotional harms because they're so invisible. And the other person doesn't have to own what they did. If they threaten you physically or hurt you physically, they have to own that. So let's look at emotional harm. That means actions, words, or behaviors that inflict distress, anguish, or pain on your well-being. This can include things we've talked about here many times on the show: verbal abuse, manipulation, especially gaslighting, any invalidation of your feelings, or intentional humiliation. Emotional harm can result in feelings of fear, anxiety, depression, definitely low self-esteem, and absolutely difficulty trusting others. The physical harm is pretty obvious. Any bodily injury, violence, or force, or even threats of physical harm are included in that. Physical abuse, sexual violence, domestic violence, any action, though, that causes you pain, injury, or discomfort is included in that. And they can result in physical injuries, obviously, big trauma, chronic pain, disability, long-term health consequences. What about psychological harm? Well, that involves damage to your mental health, your cognitive functioning, which we don't talk about enough, your sense of identity and self-worth. This can include experiences that you might have had in the past, or maybe even currently, or both, that are about harassment, any kind of bullying, discrimination, coercive control, even exposure to traumatic events. We know that psychological harm can result in conditions like anxiety disorders, PTSD, depression, complex trauma, CPTSD, and absolutely difficulty forming healthy relationships. So overall, the unsafe moment means that there was a sense of threat or danger to your well-being, whether that threat manifests in emotional distress, physical injury, psychological trauma, or all the above, doesn't matter. What matters is that we recognize and we address unsafe moments, both the ones that happened to us in the past and the ones that may be coming up for us, so that we can promote safety, normalize healing, and take it seriously. So let's continue to talk about some of the effects, because again, I think that if you grew up with some of this or you experienced some of this, those people causing the unsafe moment are also normalizing it for you, and you probably didn't have people around you to call it out and say, hey, this is really crazy. This is not good. So your brain just adapts and thinks it's okay, or minimizes how harmful. You may realize, that's not okay. That was very upsetting. But have you minimized what it was really doing to you? Because unsafe moments can significantly impact your mental health, create all the things we just talked about, create symptoms of intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, hypervigilance, avoidance behaviors, mood disturbances, obviously difficulty sleeping and concentrating, but feelings of fear, anger, shame, guilt, sadness, helplessness. A lot of people struggle to regulate their emotions too, so they have a lot of dysregulation, they have a lot of mood swings, they have difficulty forming connections that aren't chaotic. There's a lot of push-pull there, because they don't know how to attach in healthy ways because of all the trauma. It creates a lot of cognitive issues too, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of self-blame, distorted beliefs about safety and trust, negative self-perceptions, and just really trying to do anything to play it safe cognitively. We can protect ourselves by withdrawing socially, isolating, only keeping ourselves to a few people in our life, not putting ourselves out there, not embracing new situations. I see a lot of social anxiety for these people. And sometimes they think they're just introverted, or they're afraid of crowds or public speaking. And when you talk to them long enough, you understand that no, it's self-esteem and trauma, emotional trauma from very unsafe moments, too many of them in their life. So their brain is just doing what their brain is supposed to do, and that's protect themselves. Because here's the thing, the moment is when we are the most vulnerable in all ways. And so that's where we need to feel safe and secure to connect, safe and secure to deal with conflict effectively, to take care of ourselves, to negotiate needs, to set boundaries, to be able to listen, to show up and be emotionally present. Everything happens in that moment. And if your moments were unsafe, enough of them, it left you feeling vulnerable, mistrustful, and hyper aware of potential threats in your environment. And to complicate it, you probably continue to go on and pick unsafe people to have in your life because they felt familiar and they were wounded just like you, and you just kept playing it out, reinforcing the belief that is anyone safe? And there are safer people out there. So let's talk about who are these people that perhaps made it unsafe for you. And you may have made it unsafe for other people as well. And that's something we always want to check ourselves around as well. I mean, of course, we don't want to minimize the impact of things that happen to us, but we also, therefore, have to own how we may have hurt others, even unintentionally, out of our own pain. Okay, so who are the perpetrators? There are many different people, anyone really, who can hurt you. But I think it helps to look at categories to kind of get you thinking and to get you remembering and unearthing. So family is where we're going to start. Your parents, your siblings, your extended family, All of them can contribute to unsafe moments because they might have done various forms of abuse, neglect, even emotional neglect, and all the dysfunctional dynamics. Examples are manipulation, physical or verbal abuse, even just shaming you for not getting a good grade, neglecting your basic needs, and your psychological and emotional needs are included in that. That's why I do a whole module on that in the course, because I think it's really important. All kinds of boundary violations within the family. And remember, that was our first classroom. That was supposed to be our safe place. Friends. Close friends can contribute to unsafe moments, especially with betrayal, gossip, manipulation, any kind of nasty peer pressure. There might have been breaches of trust where your good friend really let you down. Maybe you were excluded from things. You were bullied, coerced. You felt insecure and vulnerable. So kids can be really cruel, we know this. And it is especially hard if that was your good friend that you thought was safe and thought you could trust. What about romantic partners? Especially your first romantic relationships when you were young. Unsafe moments look like emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, obviously, but any kind of manipulation, control, gaslighting, infidelity, irresponsibility, any ways that you couldn't work through conflicts with them because they were defensive and immature. Maybe they raged, maybe they shut down, maybe they gave you the silent treatment. Maybe they talked you out of your reality. Authority figures, your teachers, your mentors, maybe your coaches, religious leaders, later on your employers. They wield power and influence over us when we're young. And that can really make us very susceptible to unsafe situations because there's that big power differential. Now, this abuse of authority can take a million forms, but some of them most common are exploitation, any kind of harassment, discrimination, coercion, or any kind of boundary violations. Being shamed in front of the class or in front of the team or at a meeting. So those are the people that we know. And what about the people that we don't know? Strangers. Now, this is less common, but it can happen. Especially in public places or unfamiliar environments like a bar, a restaurant, a party, a concert. Things like harassment, assault, theft, stalking, scams. So here's the thing, whether it was through intentional harm, neglect, any kind of boundary violations, or other harmful behaviors, what matters is that you understand that we need to address these and not just step over them and brush them off, which is a coping skill I run into all the time with clients who went through horrific bullying, harassment, discrimination, or they might be going through those things now, especially in the workplace. And they've learned to be tough to deal with it, but it still does harm. That's what we need to remember. So let's talk about some long-term effects. The long-term effects are a big deal, and we want to look at how profound and enduring they can be. Because we want to understand the seriousness of this and how we need to look at it, we need to heal it, we need to change it for ourselves. Mental health. Big one is anxiety disorders. Unsafe moments can really contribute to like generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety, like we mentioned earlier, panic disorder. People can experience persistent worry, fear, and avoidance because your brain is trying to protect you from perceived threats in the future. There's a risk of depression. Usually low-level depression where people function, they go to work, they do the dishes, they take care of the kids, but they're not okay. And depression can become very serious, especially if there's been a more recent trauma that someone is not getting treatment for. PTSD, There's complex PTSD, like the childhood stuff we mentioned. People can have memories, flashbacks, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, too, is a characteristic. There's a whole range of things like emotional dysregulation, difficulty in relationships, negative self-concept. Again, there's a continuum of how traumatic things were for you. So don't blow it off and say, well, I don't have those issues, because it still affected you. And every one of us is different. And we don't want to put any one of us in a box. We want to understand that it is important to call it. How bad was it? And what are you still struggling with today because of it? Relationships is another area. I mean, obviously, trust issues are going to be big. It makes it hard for you to form and maintain healthy relationships, even with healthier people. You might struggle to trust other people's intentions. It might be hard for you to be vulnerable, obviously, to open up and let people in, to share your shame and your fears. Can you trust them to hold those things safe and not throw them back at you in an argument later? Or to not betray your trust and share that information without your permission? Those kinds of things. Conflict is going to be a big problem. So people who have experienced unsafe moments are really going to struggle with interpersonal conflict because they're going to be hypervigilant to perceived threats. You're going to be in fight or flight all the time. This makes it really hard to communicate, to ask for what you need in the moment, to set boundaries in a healthy way with detachment, to work on solutions. These things are doable, but it takes a lot of work. There are attachment issues. There can be a disruption to secure attachment bonds. And that's a whole nother episode to talk about all of that. But you might have fear of abandonment. You might have some dependency stuff going on, avoiding emotional intimacy. A big one is the blow to your self-esteem. Unsafe moments really undermine someone's self-esteem and self-worth. Obviously, if you're being shamed and screamed at, you're going to have negative self-perceptions. You're going to internalize that critical parent and beat yourself up today for not being perfect. You may also internalize shame or blame for the unsafe experiences you had to go through. That is very common. As messed up as that sounds, that is extremely common. And that's why the grief work and the trauma work is so important. Hand in hand with this is a lot of self-doubt, so people have a hard time making decisions. They don't trust their own perceptions, their own judgments or decisions, and that can make it really hard for them to feel like they have a sense of agency and they can make things happen in their life. Making decisions from a restaurant menu to where to live and where to work and everything in between can be exhausting for them. And they probably procrastinate a lot because of it. So avoidance, obviously, is a big characteristic of emotional trauma. You're going to avoid danger or perceived danger. The other thing this does is really plays into imposter syndrome, because people in those unsafe moments were talked out of their truth or not allowed to express their truth. So it's really hard for people to feel confident just standing up there and talking about their abilities, their accomplishments, owning those things, letting them be true about them, not in an egoic way, just an honest, authentic way. Because they're so afraid they're going to be exposed as a fraud. And think about that for a minute. If a kid is bullied and called out in the hallway in middle school, how terrifying is that for that person later on to go put themselves out there vulnerably and maybe give a presentation or sing a song or ask the bank for a loan for their new business? It's going to be hard. The brain doesn't forget. So there are a lot of long-term effects of unsafe moments in mental health and our relationships and our self-esteem, and they do cause problems. And I just want to stop here and say, some of you who are high achievers might think you are fine, quote unquote, but you probably have a lot of control issues and a lot of relational issues And you may have paid the price for striving so hard for approval. Because that's the whole deal. The moment wasn't safe to be loved, to be approved of, to be accepted, to be acknowledged, to be honored, to be heard, to be respected. So that makes sense. So how do we work on this? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to get real with ourselves and acknowledge and validate all of our experiences that we can remember that were unsafe. And why were they unsafe? Here's why this is so important. The first thing is validation affirms reality. Let me repeat that. Validation affirms reality. When your experiences of unsafe moments are acknowledged and validated, like you make sense, this confirms that what you went through is real and legitimate. This then helps you feel seen, heard, and understood, which not only is comforting, but it helps you build self-trust. Like now you make sense. Now you don't feel compartmentalized into 50 different parts. You feel more integrated. Your insides match your outsides more. You're not hiding anything from yourself or from anyone else. So it increases our confidence. And it reduces our self-doubt and our self-blame too. A lot of people, like I mentioned earlier, when they went through these experiences, they were often manipulated before, during, and after these unsafe moments. So if a child, let's say, was screamed at for bringing home a C+ on his math test, and then he got really upset, and then the family talked him out of being upset, like, look, dude, you got to toughen up. Dad's just trying to help you get better grades. Well, think about how gaslighty that feels. And so the child's going to walk away thinking, I must be bad. It must be my fault. They must be right. They go through life questioning whether they were really at fault, whether those experiences were messed up, and why they were messed up, and why they were awful. So the validation helps to counteract the harmful beliefs that are distorted by family, because they affirm that their feelings and their experiences back then were valid and deserving of attention and support, and their innocence is validated. You know, it's rarely the child's fault. Responsibility always lies with the grown-up in the room and or the older sibling or older child. If there's a couple years difference between two kids, we typically hold the older child responsible. They're older, they're wiser, they know better. They have more power. Sometimes they're bigger and they have more strength. So they have actual physical power over the younger child. The other thing this does is it promotes emotional healing. It creates a safe place to have a safe moment, right? It's that corrective emotional experience where you can process and express your feelings, even if you couldn't do it back then, especially because you couldn't do it back then. This encourages healing because it gives you an opportunity, to out loud explore and understand the impact of all this stuff on you and to get the healing that you need, because you need other people to validate what other people messed up for you. It also encourages the vulnerable thing of asking for help and seeking support, because that is something probably hard for you to do if you went through the things we're mentioning today on the show. When the experiences of unsafe moments are acknowledged and validated, we're more likely, obviously, to seek out support from friends and family, maybe professionals, because we know we're going to be taken seriously and hopefully receive some empathy around what we're reaching out about. This strengthens trust in our relationships, hopefully, because when we experience empathy, compassion, and understanding in a consistent, not perfect, but consistent way, it helps us recreate a sense that maybe connections can be safe. Maybe I can trust. Maybe I can be open and vulnerable. So it's very empowering because it gives us a new sense of agency and autonomy and the right to set boundaries. I think it helps people reclaim their sense of control and autonomy. So overall, acknowledging and validating experiences of unsafe moments is so important for promoting healing. It's crucial if we want to feel more empowered, trust ourselves more, have more confidence, and have better connections and better relationships. I think it creates a foundation that is so crucial for healing and growth. That's what I witness in the group coaching that I do every month for course participants. It is so cool to watch. Each of them feel supported, encouraged, heard, maybe lovingly challenged, but it's a safe space to do the healing. We can't do all of this work in our journal and in our head and our heart. We have to have people there, safe people, to help us heal. That's why it's so important for you to find a safe space to do this work. More than one safe space is even better. Let's say you have a therapist or a coach and a support group and one or two good friends who have done some work on themselves as well. So, they have good boundaries and detachment and can be there for you. Boundaries is a big deal. It's a big paradigm to work on, but absolutely necessary for this. Setting boundaries and advocating for yourself in future interactions is so important. You need to know that you are eventually going to be able to do that. You won't have self-respect and you won't have healthy relationships if you don't. Boundaries allow you to define your personal space, where you end and others begin. It establishes a really clear framework for how you want to be treated and how you treat others. What's acceptable, what isn't. And so this is really important because if you're going to do all this work to heal what happened, you want to make damn sure that going forward, it's going to be different and you're going to do everything in your control to have healthy boundaries in your relationship so that can be the case. So today we talked about the profound impact of acknowledging and addressing unsafe moments in your life. We explored the different aspects of these moments from emotional, physical, and psychological harm and talked about how it's so important to validate these experiences to heal them. Going forward, to promote healing, we need boundaries, we need safe people to process with, and we need to build trust in ourselves so that we can have healthier relationships with ourselves and others and have the life that we would have had if the moments in the past hadn't been so unsafe. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you walked away with something useful. If you struggle with this stuff, you're not the only one. This is very common, unfortunately, and there's work you can do to heal. Check out the course in the show notes, and if you have any questions around that, let me know. It's a great place to do this kind of work. And if you don't get the newsletter, which has everything in it, from playing the episode to the weekly blog to all of the information about masterclasses that I have going on and freebies and downloads and all the things, go to ownitpowercast.com and sign up there. All right. Pay it forward. Keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.